I spent 4 years trying to escape the rat race, using advice that sounded great on paper and did absolutely nothing in real life. Side hustles that ate my weekends and paid less than minimum wage. Passive income courses that were only passive for the person selling them. Crypto trades I will not even talk about. None of it worked. Not because I did not try hard enough, but because almost everything marketed as an escape from the rat race is actually just a slower, more exhausting version of the same race. Then I found something different. Not a hack, not a trick, an actual strategy built on principles that wealthy families have quietly used for generations, and it finally clicked for me in a way nothing else had. Today I am going to walk you through exactly what it is, why it works, and how you can start applying it this month, even if you are starting from nothing. This is not going to be a video about grinding harder. It is about understanding a game that most of us were never taught the rules to. I am Josephine, and this channel exists for first-generation earners who are building wealth without a blueprint. Let's get into it. Before I explain the strategy, I need you to understand the actual mechanics of the trap, because most people can feel that something is wrong without being able to name it. The rat race is not just having a job. It is a specific financial pattern. You trade hours for money. That money covers your expenses. Your expenses rise to match your income. And at the end of every cycle, you are right back where you started, just more tired. The defining feature of the rat race is not effort. It is the absence of a gap. There is no space between what comes in and what goes out, which means there is no fuel available to build anything that could ever replace your income. Robert Kiyosaki's Rich Dad, Poor Dad popularized this idea decades ago, and the core insight still holds up. The wealthy do not primarily earn through labor. They earn through ownership, assets that produce income whether or not they personally show up to work that day. Everyone else earns through labor, and labor has a hard ceiling. There are only so many hours in a day, and eventually your body and your time run out. So the real question is not how do I work harder? It is how do I convert some portion of my labor income into assets that work independently of my hours? That conversion is the entire strategy. Let me show you how it actually works. Stage 1. Create the gap before you do anything else. The first stage of this strategy has nothing to do with investing. It has nothing to do with side hustles. It is entirely about creating a gap between your income and your expenses, because without that gap, nothing else in this video will work for you. Most people try to build wealth backwards. They try to invest first and hope a gap appears later. It rarely does, because lifestyle naturally expands to consume whatever income is available unless you deliberately interrupt that pattern. Here is the practical version of this. The moment any new income arrives, whether from a raise, a bonus, or extra work, you send a fixed percentage of it directly into savings or investing before you ever see it in your spending account. I recommend starting at 20% if you can manage it, but even 10% creates real momentum. The specific number matters, less than the discipline of automating it immediately before your lifestyle has a chance to expand around the new income. This single habit is the difference between people who eventually escape the rat race and people who simply earn more money while staying exactly as trapped as before. Once that gap exists consistently, month after month, you have created the raw fuel needed for the next stage. Stage 2. Use the gap to buy back your time, not just things. This is the stage almost everyone gets wrong, and it is the reason so many people stay stuck even after they start saving money. The instinct once you have some savings is to spend it on lifestyle upgrades. A nicer apartment, a better car, more convenience. All of that feels like progress, but none of it moves you closer to escaping the rat race because none of it produces income or frees up your time. The strategy instead is to use your growing gap to buy back small amounts of your own time and redirect that time toward building an asset, even a tiny one. This might look like using a portion of your savings to outsource a task that currently eats 2 hours of your week and spending those 2 hours instead building a skill, a small digital product, or researching your first investment properly instead of doing it exhausted at midnight. It might look like negotiating 4 hours of remote flexibility at your current job so you can use quiet morning time before anyone else is awake to work on something that belongs to you. The goal at this stage is not to quit your job. It is to carve out small, protected pockets of time and treat that time as sacred, because time is the one resource you cannot get back once it is spent. Every hour you reclaim and redirect toward building an asset is an hour no longer trapped inside the labor for money exchange. Stage 3. Build one real asset, not 5 half-finished ones. Here is where most people sabotage themselves without realizing it. They spread their reclaimed time and money across 5 different income ideas at once, and because attention is divided 5 ways, none of them ever gain enough momentum to actually produce income. The strategy requires picking exactly one asset category and committing to it fully for at least 12 months before judging whether it works. Broadly, real assets fall into a few categories. Index fund investing, which is slow but extremely reliable over long time horizons. Real estate, which requires more capital but can produce genuine passive income once established. A small digital business, such as a course, a tool, or content that continues earning after the initial work is done. Or ownership in an existing business, whether through direct investment or negotiated equity at your job. Notice that none of these are side hustles in the traditional sense. A side hustle where you trade additional hours for additional money is still labor. It just happens to be a second job. The distinction that matters is whether the income continues if you stop actively working on it. Pick the category that fits your current skills, capital, and time constraints honestly, not the one that sounds most impressive to talk about. Consistency in one lane beats brilliance spread across 5. This is usually the longest stage, and it is also the stage where most people quit, right before it would have started compounding. If you take away only one thing from this entire video, let it be this. Give one asset 12 real months before you decide it does not work. Stage 4. Let compounding do the heavy lifting. Once your one asset is generating even a small amount of income, the temptation is to immediately spend that income. Resist that completely, at least for the first several years. Every dollar your asset produces should be reinvested directly back into either growing that same asset or diversifying into a second one, once the first is stable and requires less of your direct time. This is where the entire strategy starts to feel less like effort and more like momentum. In the early months, growth feels painfully slow, almost invisible. But compounding is deceptive in its early stages and dramatic in its later ones. Albert Einstein reportedly called compound interest the 8th wonder of the world, and whether or not he actually said those exact words, the underlying truth holds. Small, consistent reinvestment compounds into results that look impossible from where you are standing today. The families who quietly escaped the rat race generations ago did not do it through one dramatic breakthrough. They did it by reinvesting consistently for long enough that the asset eventually produced more income than their original job ever could. This stage requires patience more than any other, and patience is the actual scarce resource in wealth building, not intelligence, not luck, and not even capital. I want to be honest with you about timelines, because most content online either promises this happens in 90 days or pretends it takes 40 years. Neither is realistic. For most people starting with little to no capital, the first 18 to 36 months are almost entirely about stages 1 and 2. Building the gap and reclaiming time. It can feel like nothing is happening because the visible income has not appeared yet. Somewhere between year 2 and year 5, if you have stayed committed to a single asset, you typically start to see income that feels meaningful, though rarely enough yet to fully replace a salary. Full replacement of your primary income, the actual moment your asset could theoretically support you without a job, tends to land somewhere between year 5 and year 10 for most people using this approach, depending heavily on your starting capital and the asset category you chose. That timeline is not exciting to say out loud, and it will not get many people to watch this whole video. But it is true, and I would rather you succeed slowly than fail quickly chasing a shortcut that does not exist. So here is the entire strategy in one sentence. Create a gap between income and expenses. Use that gap to buy back your time. Invest that time into exactly one real asset for at least a year, and reinvest everything that asset produces until compounding takes over. It is not glamorous, and it will not make for a dramatic thumbnail promising overnight riches, but it is the actual mechanism behind almost every real escape from the rat race that I have researched, including my own. Here is your action step for this week. Calculate what percentage gap currently exists between your income and your expenses. If the honest number is 0, your first job is not investing. It is creating that gap, even by 5%. Tell me in the comments which stage you are currently on, stage 1, 2, 3, or 4. I read every comment, and I want to know exactly where you are starting from. If this video was useful, subscribe for a new video every week, built specifically for people building wealth without a blueprint. I will see you in the next one.